One of the most common responses I get from business owners and managers to, hey, how are you today? Is, you guessed it, busy, really, really busy. But here's a couple of bigger questions. Are you feeling like you're always busy but never advancing? Are you experiencing the frustration of missed targets and disjointed team efforts? You might believe you're doing everything right, yet the results are telling a different story. There may be an invisible gap that might be holding you back from true success. And that's what we're talking about today on Marc Haine Live. Welcome to this episode. This is where small business owners and entrepreneurs develop new skills and help create the jaw dropping, show stopping experience that their customers and their employees deserve. I am your host, customer and employee experience strategist, Marc Haine, and it is so great to have you along for this episode. My guest today is the business strategy expert, Jennifer Drago. And today we are going to be exploring the costly impact of operating our business without a clear business vision and strategic plan. We are going to be zeroing in on a pervasive issue that, although common, is rarely ever addressed with the urgency and the depth that it demands. I know that you feel it when our businesses are at a relentless pace. The stakes are very high, and there's one silent saboteur that lurks in the shadows, often unnoticed until it is way too late. And it drains resources, it dilutes focus, and it derails progress, leaving even the most seasoned leaders wondering what the heck is going on and where did that path go wrong? And that brings us to our question of the Have you ever found yourself pouring time, energy, and resources into your business only to realize that you're not getting any closer to your goals than when you started? Does it feel like, despite your best efforts, the roadmap to success is still shrouded in a lot of fog? We want this journey to be interactive. As we dive into today's topic, I encourage you to share your thoughts, experiences, and questions in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts and make you part of this conversation. As I mentioned, I am really pleased today to have business strategy expert Jennifer Drago join us today. Jennifer is not just a strategist by title, she's the walk the talk specialist as a chief strategy officer and VP of planning for large corporations. She has a track record of launching innovative programs in a fiscally responsible manner, including a nationally recognized care transitions program. Her expertise includes executive leadership, strategic planning, businesses, and service line planning. I'm not quite sure what that is, service line
Mhm,
planning, but she does
mhm.
feasibility analysis and she does governance and board development. My goodness, it is so broad. She holds a bachelor's degree in finance and two master's degrees. A little bit of an underachiever, if I do say so myself. Jennifer is a sought after expert and speaker, facilitator, best selling author, and host of the Senior Living Visionaries podcast. Jennifer, welcome to the show. It is so great to have you.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here, and I love this topic. It's something I nerd out on often, but it's so important, as you mentioned, because we're all running businesses and we can't run around with our hair on fire. We need to be really strategic, and it's not as difficult as some will make it out to be. So I'm hoping we can bring some simplicity to this topic today.
It sounds like a plan. Before we get started, could you just tell me a little bit about how you serve your clients?
Sure. So I am a consultant. I spent 30 years, as you mentioned, predominantly in healthcare and senior living, and working in the strategy area on strategic planning, program planning, facilities planning. And I do a lot of that same work today with my clients. So I can come in and help them craft their business vision, their business strategy, help them get really clear on where they're headed in their business. I do some program planning. You mentioned service planning. So basically feasibility analysis on, should we go in this direction? Should we add this service to our complement of services that we provide as a business. Does that make sense? I do a lot of leadership development and training around these topics. And then also, because I work in the nonprofit sector a lot, that's where the governance and the board development comes in, because nonprofits are only as strong as their boards. And so I spend a lot of time educating about that as well.
Being on multiple boards, I can't agree with you more. Let's start off. So you mentioned something. You said business vision. And this is really the focus of today's show. Is this idea of business vision versus a vision statement? Can we start off by defining what business vision is and what it is not?
You bet. You bet. So, yeah, when we come into any business or come into business school, we hear about, a mission statement and a vision statement. And a mission statement is often what do we do or why does the organization exist? And the vision statement tends to be an aspirational statement of a future state that you hope your business helps to bring about, which is great. In my work of strategic planning, I like to use a vision directed strategic planning process. And so we take that vision statement and we make it into a vision script or a vision narrative, if you will. So it's more of a paragraph description of where we're headed, where we're taking our business over the next 10 years. And it actually becomes a very descriptive portrait when it's read that anybody can get on board with. So, we talked about board members, we have our leadership, we have all of our team members. If we have volunteers involved in our business, when they read this vision narrative, they know exactly where you, as the leader, are taking that business. And sometimes they'll help you to see opportunities that you may not even know exist. But you mentioned roadmap, and so I'm going to use a roadmap analogy as well. Your vision for your business becomes your destination on your roadmap. So you set your GPS to move toward that vision. And I mentioned it's a 10-year vision generally. Sometimes we use a little bit shorter visions, but I love 10 years because it's big picture and it usually gets people to think big and outside the box. And so when you know where your destination is, then you can start to think of your annual strategic plans and goals in terms of, okay, what do I need to do to get over the next year, 1 year down that road toward that vision?
Right, right. And I can see when you hear some of the statistics about the number of small businesses that don't survive past the 5 year mark, having a
Mhm.
10-year vision can really help move that forward. I do know that having worked with entrepreneurs and grassroots business owners, that some of them
Mhm.
go, "Yeah, I have a great, I have a strategic plan. I don't need anything." Are there any telltale signs that a business is operating without a clear strategic plan or vision?
Yeah, the leader probably makes a statement like you just made as an example,
Okay.
right? No, I mean, so whether you have a team of 3 or a team of 300 or 3,000, right? You need
Yeah.
a written strategic plan. You need to be very clear about where you're headed and what your immediate goals are. And the telltale sign, I think, would be that everybody on the team can't tell you what their strategic priorities are for the organization. That's so common. Even in Fortune 500 companies, I think the statistic is around 70 to 80% of even the leadership team, which should be able to recite these things in their sleep, don't know what the strategies are or can't speak to the strategic priorities of the organization. Then when you get down to the front line of the organization, that
It's completely
number
blurred.
is exactly. And
Yeah.
so, how do you expect your team to row in unison like a championship crew team if they don't even know what they're aiming for or what the calls are that they're supposed to be making? So,
Yeah, it's so true.
I think the telltale sign is really just that lack of alignment throughout the organization.
Yeah. And I worked with the municipality, and the council decided that they were going to do a 15 priority strategic plan. And it blew my mind because it's like, no, let's bring it down to three. You're in your seat for 4 years. Let's bring it, because if everything's a priority, then nothing is a priority. Is that fair?
That is so true, and I can't tell you how many organizations, my own included, that I used to have that conversation,
Mhm,
on an annual basis. So it's always about what are we taking out of the strategic plan to really show what our priorities are, and it should be 3 to 5 key strategic priorities in a year, definitely
mhm.
not more than that. Less is more. I think that's a mantra we can all adopt when it comes to having a strategic plan.
It just gives you, but again, using your GPS as a focal point, your GPS is going to be picking one track for you to get to your destination, not 15.
Right,
They might give you three different options. Depending on
right.
if you want to get there faster or shorter or whatever. Are there any specific departments when we come to organizations that have a lack of strategic vision? Are there specific departments or areas within organizations that are more vulnerable to the consequences of not having a really good strategic vision?
You mentioned customer service in terms of one of your areas of
Hmm.
consulting, and I would say, trying to serve the customer can become an elusive target if we don't really know what is the key variable that we're solving for. Right? Is it
Hmm.
quality? Is it repeat customer business? Is it revenue? What so. Really, everything in the business can suffer if we're not aligned in what the strategy is for the business. So I would say there's not one key area. I think everybody is equally affected, but the other one that comes to mind that could be more so affected could be marketing. Right. So you want to, your marketing dollars and your sales dollars generally follow your strategy. And again, if that isn't truly aligned, you could be wasting money
Hmm.
and marketing to the wrong target audience or not having a product that serves the correct um, target audience.
Well, we definitely have seen that there are businesses in our communities and in and around our bigger city centers where there's an incongruity between one's values, one's marketing message, and one's deliverables. We're constantly seeing it on social media, on the rant and rave pages, where people's expectations have not been met.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah. And that's for sure when it comes to customer service. I can give you so many examples of that
Yeah,
from my own. Everybody has them, right? From your own personal experience where
yeah.
you bought a product, your expectations weren't met, you try to get it resolved, and, it's the rigmarole, or you can't get anybody on the phone, or, oh gosh, can you find a phone number on their website to actually talk to a human, or is it
Hmm.
only, email chats that you can have? It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so funny because that experience of that expectation really paints a picture on whether or not I'm dealing with a company that shares my values or
Mhm.
not. I just a very quick thing this past weekend. The I have a water pick in the shower, and the holder for the it broke. Well, I've had this water pick for probably 10 years, but just for the heck of it, I took a picture of it. I sent it off to Water Pick. I got a notification yesterday that a new mount is coming. And it's like they didn't have to do it, but I just thought, and so it's like here's a company that shares my values that the customer, and for what it costs, the 35-cent piece or the dollar piece or whatever plus postage has made me now a fan of Waterpik forever because they cared
Yes.
enough to respond.
Yes.
Right?
Another great example of that I hear about and I've experienced personally is the Bose Corporation. So I had some headphones that I used to work out, and they were way out of warranty and they started to fall apart and break.
Hmm.
And, I called them and I said, "Hey, what can I do about this?" They stand behind their product so much that, for a reduced cost, I was able to get a new pair. They couldn't send them to me free, but I think it was $20. They sent me a new pair. And to your point, I'm a Bose customer for life. Their
Yeah.
products are fantastic to begin with, but I used the heck out of this thing and they still stood behind it.
Yeah. And so does would it be fair to say then that the strategic vision of a company includes our values as much as it does any other thing?
Great question. Yes, the vision of your organization and where you're headed very much should incorporate your values. And if the values are static and they're long-standing, great, let's represent them. If you're trying to achieve a value that you haven't yet, like you want that um, long-standing customer loyalty, then that should be reflected in your vision as well. And I will say one quick thing about values is that if an organization hasn't taken the time to really formulate the values that they want to be known for, and again, those two should be limited, I would say 3 to 5. They should, because when it comes to decisions in the future about does a product, should we add this product? Should we add this service? Should we, morph what we do? Your values will help you answer those questions faster than anything else.
Hmm.
And it's, what do you want to be known for? And very often, again, we're taking that less is more approach and,
Yeah.
and having to really stick to what is key to serving with these values.
It really is a litmus test on
Mhm.
your decision making. In your experience, what are the most common misconceptions entrepreneurs have about strategic planning and the impact of defining that vision? Because I know a lot of small businesses, and it's like, oh, well, no, we like to stay static because, we don't want to be static. We want to be really dynamic. And, we're going to do a 10-year plan and life is going to change in 2 years. What?
And that's true, right? Your 10-year vision is subject to change, right? Subject to pivots, and you're not going to you're going to redefine that 10-year plan every couple of years, right? So you're
Okay.
uh, important to know we still want to be agile. We still want to be adaptable to environmental trends. We don't want them to be distractions and wag the dog, have the tail wag the dog, if you will,
Hmm.
right? So the thing, one of the common misconceptions I would say about strategic planning is that it's only necessary, one, if you're a big corporation. Um, and if you're not a big corporation, and you mentioned entrepreneurs or small business, they tend to be small. So some of those leaders will say, you mentioned this earlier, it's in my head. I know what it
Yeah.
is. Well, if it's in your head, it's not really a strategic plan. It needs to be committed to paper and it needs to be shared with your team members. One of the biggest things that I saw happen in the corporate environment, and I still, as I work with my clients, sometimes I see this happen too, is a great strategic plan will be formulated and then it will sit in a drawer or in a binder on a shelf. And that the biggest thing that you can do besides getting it onto paper and sharing it is sharing it over and over again. Your strategic plan has to have visibility. And I'll go so far to say for the leaders that are listening today that we need to have a dashboard which we can share on a monthly basis at minimum. Weekly is even better, to say, here's our strategic priorities. And under each of those, here's some of the goals that we have for this year or this quarter. And how are we doing on those goals? What's the status of each? And I love a stoplight diagram. So then we code each of those as green, yellow, or red. Green is we're
Hmm.
doing great. We don't even have to
Perfect. Yeah.
talk about it. Yellow, we have some issues. Let's chat. Red, we're at risk and we need to either reassess or, sometimes we do stop on certain things. If we go down a path and something is not able to be achieved, we realize that early on. That's okay too, but at least we're having discussion about the things that matter. So the monitoring of your strategic plan is really important right after the visibility.
Now, you mentioned that the strategic priorities should be visited quite frequently because things will change, and so in order to
Mhm.
stay agile, we have to be aware of it. Does that change our goals? Like, do our goals also need to be revamped when we redo and when we revisit our strategic plans?
Great question. I usually advise that we do goals on an annual basis. So we set annual goals. Those generally don't change in the course of the year. What will change is sometimes the tactics underneath. So,
Yes.
if we have 3 to 5 key strategic goals that we're going to work on this year, we have different activities under each that are going to happen. That's really where the adjustments can be made. Sometimes there are timeline adjustments. Something just is taking longer than it was expected to, or we've hit a barrier and we need to do something a little differently.
Yeah. We started off the show talking about this whole thing about business operators and business owners being so busy. They're busy
Mhm.
all the time. How does this whole idea of defining a strategic vision and strategic planning, how does this help absolve and alleviate some of this "I am just so busy all the time" kind of mindset?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, it should tell you where you should be spending your time. So, as a business leader, if you have those 3 to 5 strategic goals, you should be able to prioritize your days and your weeks based on what's reflected in that strategic plan. Now, I want to be really clear because when we're talking about small businesses and entrepreneurs, we are operators and we have to be strategic, right?
Sure.
So we need to set aside time to do both. So every single day I'm working on my client stuff. But if I want to grow my podcast or prospect for new business or work on my sales funnel, I need to carve out separate time for that. So I'm going to encourage leaders to have their operational time when their hair's on fire throughout the week. They're working with their clients or serving their customers, but they need to set aside usually 4 to 8 hours a week to work on those strategic priorities because those are things that aren't going to move unless you dedicate time to them. And
Right.
we all know how our calendars fill up.
And I mean, the crisis of the moment will push those calendars. So part of what we have to figure out is how do we respect ourselves enough to live our calendar to its
Mhm.
fullest thing, being able to turn around. But again, we did an episode on delegation. How important is delegation within the confines of our vision and our planning?
It's so important. And, again, working with small businesses and especially small businesses that are growing rapidly, I tend to see a lot of leaders that are very reluctant to delegate. And that was probably what your episode covered a lot of.
Yep.
And you really have to think of as a leader, I need to be in my zone of genius. And if my zone of genius is not sending emails and scheduling meetings, then I need to delegate that to someone else because my worth is, here. This is where I bring value to the business. So it's absolutely a big part of having that strategic focus and dedicating that strategic time. The only way you can have strategic time is if you delegate other things to other people that are better suited.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into some concrete strategies on
Mhm.
how to become more strategic in how we drive this, and we'll get to that right after this.
When the spotlight shines on your business, are customers applauding or yawning? In other words, how is your business performing? Make your business a star with the new book, Lights, Camera, Action, Business Operational Excellence Through the Lens of Live Theater by Marc Haine. Marc uses his business and acting experience to help you see your business like a live show, so you can create a performance your customers will never forget. Buy Lights, Camera, Action today at your favorite online retailer or directly at marchaine.com.
Welcome back. I am speaking with the strategy expert, Jennifer Drago. Um, this is a fantastic conversation. It follows many different episodes of because we tune in. We each episode we really focused on different things. And as you were talking about stuff, it's like, oh, that reminds me of this episode. And yeah, we talked a little bit about this episode. So it's always pretty thrilling. And if you're tuning into this, I'd love to get your comments in the comment box because it'll give us some. I'd like you to be part of this conversation because I am absolutely certain that we'll be able to, whatever it is that is churning your butter in the back room, we can probably help you with that. What when it comes down to this idea, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes you see business leaders make as it relates to strategic planning and goal setting? We mentioned having too many.
Mhm.
Are there any other mistakes that they're making?
Yeah, and we've referenced all of these, but I want to pull them out individually. So, one is in the communication of the strategic plan. So, your strategic plan isn't a document that lives in a drawer or sits on the CEO's desk. Your strategic plan should be something that should be communicated through the organization on a very regular basis. And the beautiful thing, we're going to talk a little bit more about business vision and what's part of that narrative paragraph. If you, as the leader, can wrap that into your weekly meetings with your teams and tell that story again and again, it's going to really build a culture around that vision that you're trying to create as a leader. Let's face it, as a CEO, our biggest job is setting the vision for the organization. So I'm going to give you a tool that's going to help you do that. But the visibility and the leader talking about the importance of having that business vision and meeting those strategic goals is going to be number one on my list of things that leaders sometimes miss and make a mistake about.
That sounds so so apropos to a lot of the issues that I find when I visit entrepreneurs is
Mhm.
that they don't have these systems in place. You mentioned this idea of creating a vision narrative, which
Mhm.
I love that philosophy. What are the steps to creating this narrative as people are looking at their business going, I have my business plan, I think I know what I'm doing, but now I'm
Mhm.
learning that it might have to be deeper.
Sure. So the first thing you want to do is ask yourself a series of questions. And there's probably 8 to 10 different areas that we focus on when we create a business narrative or a vision narrative, excuse me. And it's things like when I think of my business 10 years from now, so we're recording this in 2024. So I would say by 2034, ABC company will. And then I start to create some statements underneath that that describe my business 10 years from now. So I will serve 10,000 customers per year. I will operate in a geography that not only includes the Phoenix, Arizona area, but I have now become a statewide organization. So there's we've talked about customers impacted. We can talk about revenues or dollars of impact. If we're a philanthropic organization, we can talk about dollars raised. Uh, if we have a philanthropic bent in our organization, we can talk about dollars donated. Some companies like, Tom's, when you buy something, they donate something. And so all those different things about impact can be included in different statements in that vision narrative. You should talk about, again, I mentioned geography, the customers that you serve. Many of us are global or internet based companies. And that's fine. Many of us are operating in one geography but want to expand into others. We talk about the products and services they offer. So today I may have one product that I offer, but I see opportunities to add complementary products. And so I would talk about, now I have a service line that includes 5 complementary products that all work together to serve our clients. We talk about our team. How does our team need to look different 10 years from now? So I might have a CEO and I might have a chief operating officer, but maybe in 10 years to serve the geography that I want, the customers that I want, and to build all those products, I might need a team, which means I might need a vice president of human resources. I might need a chief information officer because technology is going to lead the development of these products. I need to talk about how big my team needs to be. Will I have a volunteer base? What will I be known for as an organization? So here's where those values come in. What do I want my reputation to be? Will I have earned certain awards, certain industry awards for our quality products, or for different things that we can earn awards for? So we describe in many different ways how we want our company to look 10 years from now. And when we read it out loud, as I mentioned, it's kind of a paragraph. It's actually a series of bulleted statements. And we can send this to our team members. We can have them read it. It becomes a story that we're telling about the business that we're building. And it's just a compelling rallying cry that everyone can get their arms around.
And to me, it sounds like this is something that can be read prior to your leadership meetings to keep
Mhm.
people grounded. How can, like, one of the biggest challenges I find around teams and strategic planning and making sure things are happening. You mentioned doing a dashboard or doing like a
Mhm.
traffic light, or some people call it a report card. Are there any other ways that businesses can maintain a culture of accountability and commitment to their strategic plans?
That's a great question. So, what I like to do is I like to have a series of dashboards or report cards that are available to the leadership team, and then if there's a board involved, those also can transparently be communicated to the board.
Mhm.
Using whether it's a traffic light diagram or key performance indicators or OKRs, whatever that is, generally you want to get as measurable as you can around your goals when you set the goals, and then you know what your target is, and so then you can easily say, how am I doing against that target? And so we have our strategic dashboard, which says, how are we doing on the goals that we've set for the organization? But depending on our businesses, we might have an operational dashboard. So how many widgets have we produced? We might have a sales dashboard. How many leads are we bringing in per month? And what's our conversion rate? Depending on the different metrics that you build um, to operate and manage your business, you can have different dashboards. I come from healthcare and senior living, so we generally have a quality dashboard.
Mhm.
We've talked about customer service. You might have your net promoter score on its own dashboard. So, yes, I love to have key indicators that we're measuring and monitoring, whether it's in one dashboard or a series of dashboards. I think it's so important for any business to get where it wants to be.
I think it's fabulous, this idea of doing the dashboard, but then tying it to your vision narrative, to
Mhm.
make sure that it's always on part and that it stays top of mind. For people who are having that this is a new concept to them, they might need your help. How can people get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, my website is peak2profit.com, and you can reach me right through there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I post almost on a daily basis, and I'm very reachable through that platform. So I would say that's the two ways to get in touch with me is through the website or through LinkedIn.
Lovely. I imagine that defining one's vision and strategic plan is not a solo effort. And I find this more times, I think, with older entrepreneurs that it's my business, so it has to be my ideas. What do
Yeah.
leaders need to do to tap into the resources that they have around them?
That's a great question. And you're right. When we are founders of a business, it's really hard sometimes to see the value that others can bring to the business. And sometimes it's hard to let go of the reins a little bit. But I would say if you have a leadership team or you have a board or even key investors or people around you who understand your business, you should absolutely get their perspective in building that vision narrative and then in building the strategic priorities that come out of it. I will say, as a business owner, this is true for me, but I've counseled many on the fact that we can't be objective about our own business.
Yeah.
And we can't always be objective, even if we're the hired CEO of the business, right? Because what are we going to always think? Our way is the best way. And sometimes we need objective eyes, a third set of eyes to come in and say, or a second set of eyes to come in and say, your vision narrative says this, and your strategic priorities are these three things, yet I see you spending your time here, and that isn't really aligned with that. And you have to have a little humility and be prepared to build in others' opinions. But that's where I see the fastest growing businesses is when the leader is surrounding themselves with people smarter than them or as smart as them.
Yeah, it was interesting. In one of the stories in my book that I talk about doing a SWOT analysis by tapping into the leadership, all the different levels of leadership, but then actually going to the employees to find out some information. And the owners came back and I got challenged and they said, well, what is this thing and why are you doing it? And so I explained what a SWOT analysis was doing and what I was trying to do with the findings. And they said, but you talked to the dishwasher. And I said, yeah. And he said, what can a dishwasher tell me about my business? And so I went through,
Lots.
well, don't you think that they have ideas of where they have, bottlenecks and where they have issues with, the type of chemicals they're using? The only thing a dishwasher can tell me is when is my smoke break and when do I get paid? And it was such a limiting thing. So how do you punch through some of those attitudes? Like you mentioned, it's one thing to say you need the humility to step up and go out and listen to other people, but how do
Mhm.
we shake ourselves out of this mindset that we are the masters of our own universe?
Yeah, it's a great question, and sometimes they need someone like you or me, Mark, to actually say that out loud, right?
Right.
Everybody's perspective is important here. Here's where the vision narrative, using that dishwasher as an example, right? So
Mhm.
one, the dishwasher already has perceptions about his job and how his job could be easier or more efficient, more productive, how he could be more productive, right? But
Mhm.
now put that vision narrative in front of him and say, "Oh my gosh, if you want to go here, we have the wrong type of machinery in your kitchen. You need to redesign your kitchen because it doesn't flow the right way." Or, I mean, the ideas that are going to come from our frontline staff who know the job the best, right? If I'm the CEO, I don't know how to wash dishes. I mean, yeah, I can say, yeah, I can wash a dish, but
Mhm.
I don't have the same perspective.
Yep.
So, I think for smart CEOs, when you explain it that way, sometimes the light bulb goes on. I mean, there's
I
many people in leadership that don't have the humility to
Right.
ask those questions just because
Yeah.
they do think they know best. And yeah,
And if you're tuning into this and thinking that you have all the answers, I dare you to watch Undercover Boss and see the aha moments all the time. Like, aren't they always just blown away by what their employees know as far as the bottlenecks and all that stuff? And it's like nobody told me.
right, right. Well, and to your point, Mark, when I do a lot of this work too with going out and doing an analysis of an organization, usually before a strategic planning session. The SWOT
Sure.
analysis is key.
Mhm.
And I speak to every board member, every leadership member, lots of staff at different levels, because everybody's perspective is different, and that's when you see that things aren't always aligned. And
Right.
so again, back to having the business vision and having the strategic plan and communicating, that's where everybody rows the same way. Very
Yes.
infrequently have I done one of those analyses and found the alignment that I really hope to find.
Yeah. Well, chances are the reason why they called you was because they didn't have the alignment in the first place. So,
Yeah, and
Uh,
then and then to your point, everybody's working harder than they have to. If you want to
yes.
get further faster and get toward that business vision, let's get in alignment and all work in the same direction.
Recently I had a conversation with a business owner. He's got 80 staff members,
Mm,
and we talked a little bit about future plans, and I he came across really skittish with everything that happened through the pandemic.
mhm.
Are you seeing that goal setting and long-term goals now are being viewed as kind of a waste of time because we just don't know what's going to happen in our environments?
Yes, although I'll say I think this is really what happened is, well, and especially so one of the industries that I work in, senior living,
Mhm.
was, our
Yeah,
occupancy was
decimated.
decimated
Yeah.
during that. So it took a couple of years for operators to get back on their feet. And so when they got back on their feet, they're also now dealing with staff challenges, shortages, um, having to pay people more, inflationary pressures on their supply side, inflationary pressures on the construction side if they need to develop more product to serve the demand. So it's coming at them from all
Hmm.
angles. And um, so it took a couple of years to kind of rebuild. And then now their hair is still on fire because there's still so many challenges.
Yeah.
So have the strategic plans been updated in a couple of years? No. I mean, I'm seeing lots of organizations that are behind the eight ball in kind of rethinking, okay, what's our vision and where are we head? What are our goals to help get us there?
Yeah.
It's not as much skittish. I don't think I'm seeing people being skittish, but it's just remembering that foundational thing that we need to do because we've been fighting fires for so long.
Yeah, yeah, we really have. And to your point, everything that the healthcare and the long-term care facilities have had to deal with, paramount has been new processes and protocols, and
Mhm.
which in itself has led to more requests for staffing, and a lot of them being privately owned. This means that at some point those costs have to be passed on somewhere else, and so
Mhm.
then there's the the political firestorm of what does that look like and how do we take care, like, I mean, it becomes this whole political thing, right?
Yeah.
It's an awful place to be, and I can imagine that to be in those leadership roles in those kinds of organizations, you're just running around in circles. But again, you said about the narrative, the vision narrative. Would
Mhm.
that change an awful lot because of the pandemic? I mean, when you think about what the vision narrative is for organizations like that, would it shift an
Mhm.
awful lot?
Well, I'll give you an example. So I mentioned the construction costs and the development side. And so
Hmm.
here we are in the industry I work in a lot, senior living, and we have this huge silver tsunami, right? All the
Hmm.
baby boomers that have started to turn 65. In by 2033, we are going to have a shortage of communities for senior living for
Right.
seniors, and let's recognize also that 90% of seniors don't even see themselves moving into a community. But for those that do, we will have a shortage of brick and mortar, and then we'll also have a shortage of services that can be delivered in the home to serve these people. So, what the pandemic has done to us and to our vision narratives is that we're a little behind the eight ball here, and we may not be able to pursue our expansion the ways that we wanted to because of interests and construction loans and shortages of supplies and all of that.
Yeah.
So maybe now a senior living, instead of viewing themselves as building out a few more campuses in their neighboring communities, maybe now they're looking at, okay, I'm not going to build more brick and mortar, but I'm going to build more services that can be deployed in the home to support people. Or maybe I'm going to look a little closer at different technological advancements that can help me serve seniors without them moving in with us.
So
So yeah, so absolutely their vision narratives may have changed. And that's why I think you need to kind of relook at your vision narrative at least every 3 years.
yeah.
And maybe redefine your strategic pillars, your goals you're going to do annually. But yeah, that because your environment, especially in the work that I do, the environment changes quite rapidly.
Yeah, but I think that's the key. I think you just, if I mean, to me, this is the value of tuning into this podcast right then and there, was this idea that the vision narrative is not something that you set and forget. It's something that you come back to and say, okay, our situation is changing now. We have different circumstances that are popping up. We need to sit down and we need to redo our vision narrative and find out where we're incongruent with what we're seeing as a trend, or what we're seeing as far as an environmental issue, or even the political issue. I mean, I live
Right.
in Alberta, and Alberta, we're looking at the November election, American elections, hoping to goodness that Biden doesn't get in again, because we want our oil and gas wants that pipeline built, right?
Hmm.
And the environmentalists are turning around and going, "No, we don't want that." Right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so we have an awful lot of challenges, regardless of industry. I think we have a lot of challenges with that. We need to be very kind of dynamic in our environment. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
Well, and that said, if I go back pre-pandemic, right, we were on a pretty stable front, I would say, for at least 5 years prior to that. So
Hmm.
I might have looked at my vision narrative 3 years out, prior to the pandemic, and said, yeah, this is still achievable, right? So not
Yeah.
always is a change necessary, but yeah, when your environment's changing rapidly, then absolutely take a look at it.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about some common pitfalls people have when they're trying to uncover this for themselves. And I'd like to get to that right after this.
When you're delivering an important speech to a huge audience, it's easy to lose your place or go way over time. Give yourself an advantage with the Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app. No more checking your watch or calling for time. The Pro Speaker Presentation Speech Timer app keeps you on track with easy-to-see timers, even changing color for visual prompts during your speech. And you can set audio cues to practice, or set it to vibrate so you don't even have to look. Be the pro you know you are. Download the app at speakerpresentationtimer.com.
I hope you're getting a ton of value from today's discussion. You can certainly see that Jennifer and I are dedicated to supporting business operators just like you. So if you're planning a staff training, a leadership retreat, or a conference, feel free to connect with us to explore how maybe we can work with you and help you meet your needs. Our contact information is in the show notes. Jennifer, you have a ton of experience around this. I love the fact that your multi-industry background is it kicks in. What are some common pitfalls do you think entrepreneurs should avoid as they strive to implement this idea of creating a new vision strategy and their vision narrative?
Mhm. Well, the first thing that I think they need to do is, and we talked about that is talked about this is be really focused on 3 to 5 things that they're going to be working on, and then put your blinders on and start working on that. When you have a team, you need to involve your team in creating the vision, in creating the dashboards, in talking about this on a regular basis. And here's something we haven't yet talked about. One of the biggest pitfalls is that if you have a team, and entrepreneurs are famous for hiring a team, but maybe not doing performance reviews as we would do in the corporate world. If you have a team, you want them to have skin in the game. You want them to have their goals, individual goals, tied to your corporate goals. And you want to evaluate them on an annual basis according to those goals. You mentioned accountability earlier. And so the dashboards are part of what bring that accountability forward, but then having your annual performance review and perhaps your merit increase is also tied to that, I think brings everything into alignment. I call that kind of cascading your goals throughout the organization. Everybody has a part or a piece of those goals.
Yeah. In fact, I did a podcast, I did an episode talking about to do away with the annual review process to go with more regular sit downs
Mm,
with your
I
staff
like it.
and so to your point, when you have the roadmap, when you have the scorecard, it gives us a basis of being able to sit down and act as coaches within our teams to find out where people are headed, what are the challenges, where are their bottlenecks in making things happen, so that you're not dealing with a end of project excuse of why you're over budget or why it took so much longer than so
Yes.
right. That's been my endorsement is to go from the onboarding to the forever boarding. Um,
I love that. And I just want to point out that is really a best practice, right? So I mentioned annual reviews. That's kind of at a minimum, but hopefully, as
yes,
you're checking in with your employees, no less than quarterly on their goals. But if you can even do this monthly,
yeah.
you're giving them real time feedback that's going to help them adjust their performance.
Yeah, and you don't have to wait until crisis hits before you start being reactionary to it. This has
Right.
been a brilliant conversation. Do you have any last thoughts about what we've been talking about today?
Well, I want to offer a resource to your
Sure.
listeners on how to create a business vision narrative. And it's a workbook. I think it's 10 or 12 pages, but it asks all those questions to get them thinking about what they want their business to look like 10 years from now. And so it's on my website. I know you'll put this in the show notes, but
Yep.
peaktoprofit.com/F as in Frank /vision. And they can download that workbook free and go at it for their business.
And as they go through that exercise, if they'd like to touch base with you, could you remind us one more time how they can get a hold of you?
Yes. At peaktoprofit.com, all my contact information is there. They can even set up a free call with me if they like, and also on LinkedIn. And I know you'll put that in the show notes. They can always message me through LinkedIn.
Love. This has been a great conversation, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing your
You bet.
expertise and your passion with us today. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
It's been great. Why don't you let me know if this was of value to you? As always, my offer stands. If you would like 30 minutes of my time to brainstorm your business with you and your team, feel free to book time on my online calendar. The link is in the show notes. It is the one that is marked meetwith.marchaine.com. It would be my absolute honor to be of service to you. And while you're at it, why don't you go ahead and leave a review about this episode? I'd love to get your feedback. Was this of value to you? And of course, if you haven't done so yet, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast. That way you'll get notification when I bring you fresh new content each and every week. I appreciate you taking time to be here with me today. My name is Marc Haine. I hope you stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you dare to be the exception.